Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the 361 Degrees DVD 2. Let's get into them. And thanks to Famuji Sneaker for sending me a pair of these. If you want to check out one for yourself, I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, to me, the DVD 1 was one of the most sure-footed, stable, and just cavernous shoes out there. It was a really big footprint of a shoe. Now, that did have some drawbacks in that it may have been a little bit clunky around the edges here and there, moving around. And so it was interesting to see that the DVD 2, how it looked like 361 tried to solve some more of the, you know, the nimble type play features, but also keep it as stable and sure-footed as the DVD 1. Now that starts off in the uppers. Number one, the lace line of these things really is fascinating. It does have a slip knot in it, just like a lot of the Asics Gel Resolution shoes do over in the tennis space, in that when you pull the lateral side of the shoe, it is then also pulling the medial side with these two huge orange tabs, which actually do go pretty far down into the lateral side of the shoe. And then, like I said, of course, those tabs come up over the medial side, so when you're cinching them down, both sides wrap over top of each other. Now, the tongue on these things, it's thick enough and padded enough that I didn't really have any irritation or anything like that. There isn't a lot of communication, though, between your footbed, tongue, and the outside world. And even going into the forefoot, you do have a pretty low gusset, but that netted gusset, it really is pretty aggressive in terms of, you know, how thick the knitting is down there. And there actually is a little piece of felt in the forefoot, in the toe cap, and that's just protect your toes, which is nice, but it also doesn't allow a lot of, you know, moisture and heat egress. You look at these things on the breathability test, heated up 115.5 degrees. And on the breathability mapping, you can see really the only place the fog was getting out was the tongue. It was getting out of the tongue pretty good because the gusset on it is so low. However, when you put them on, a little bit different from here, you know, on the bench versus, you know, I guess on the hardwood bench, that tongue is pretty wide and it cinches around your anterior ankle, the front part of your ankle. And so there isn't a lot of egress out of this shoe when you actually have it on. So I'd say it's pretty much middle of the pack in terms of heating and moisture retention. I think does a pretty good job of handling that heat, but that breathability mapping just might lie a little bit on this one because, like I said, when it's actually wrapped around a human foot, man, it does cinch around that foot. But speaking of how these things lock around your midfoot, if you look at the heel count of these things, the padding on them is just crazy. Not only do you get double thick padding on the inside, you actually get some padding on the back side of it, just in case, you know, blunt trauma to the Achilles, which nice little touch, but that padding does go down very low. The ankle collar is decently padded. Heel slippage on these was just pretty mild. It got better and better as the shoe broke in. So it was mild, really not noticeable too much. One thing though I did notice is because there's all this TPU that comes up over the lateral side and then goes into the heel counter of the shoe, is that the uppers stay incredibly stable, right? There's not a lot of movement. So the containment on these is just about as good as it gets. And if you look at the upper durability test on these things, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, the burr works through the very outer like TPU layer, but it does not get into that under drag guard. You can actually see it. It's a little bit of a grayish tint in there, and the burr doesn't even get into that. So for draggers or sliders, even though it might look a little bit scuffed up on the outside, the actual durability of it should still be pretty good. And getting into the midsole teardown, this is something we're getting used to seeing with 361 shoes now, a near full bed of compartmentalized CO2-infused thermoplastic foam, which is incredibly lively. On these ones, you get an incredibly long bottom-loaded plastic shank too, which, you know, kind of goes into this, what they call their arch lock. So it's really long. It's actually really wide too, and it goes up here into that arch stabilization. Another one of those things that really aids in the containment, like I was saying, on the upper section, both laterally as well as medially. Now, it does have a little bit of carrier foam in the forefoot of the shoe as well as in the rear foot, but basically just to, you know, harness that foam, make sure that it stays a little bit more durable. On the bounce height test, this got 41 centimeters in the rear foot, 44 in the forefoot. I would say on foot, they didn't feel as bouncy as some other 361 shoes. They definitely feel very bouncy. I mean, it's thermoplastics underneath of your foot. I mean, it's going to feel pretty hoppy. Like I said, just maybe not as, you know, when you actually have them on foot as some other 361 shoes. They definitely feel a lot bouncier than a lot of other shoes, you know, I'd say just a lot of others in general. But in terms of the 361 line, these definitely feel like more of a stability-focused shoe, right? They're speedy, really sure-footed. Like I said, that shank It's that bottom-loaded plastic shank. Definitely seems more container type. Definitely seems more aiding in shock absorption, allowing that foam to kind of compress in the way you want it to when you're really kind of coming down for those crash landings. Getting into the outsole tread, you've got this radial pattern that starts right at the apex of the inflare of the shoe. That kind of goes out into almost these exclamation point type patterns, almost looks like a little digital maze going through the entire shoe. Now what's interesting is you look at it on the viewing box, there isn't a lot of individual rubber movement. The tread is just, the depth is very low, and so there's more just rubber compression along the entire, along the entire footbed. I noticed that in that these are a full-length tread pattern, and so because they had the thin tread, narrow treads as well, it definitely, like I said, it wasn't a super tack shoe, but once again, I noticed like the theme of the video, it was a sure-footed type grip. You look at it on the grip test ramp, slipped at 40 degrees, which is, getting into that upper level of grip. Like I said, I found these to be very forgiving. Like I said, because the depth isn't too deep. It's just, like I said, the tread's all kind of moving as one. It's kind of compressing and expanding as one. Look at it on the durometer. It's pretty decently high, but on the outsole durability test on these things, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Yeah, I mean, about 1 millimeter of damage on these. And like I said, the tread depth isn't all that deep. So to me, I'd be keeping these on indoor courts. Although they felt great on outdoor courts, I actually felt like the AG4, right? The midsole, the shoe kind of comes alive in its protective capability of you on outdoor courts. It's just that with these treads, you're going to lose the best part of them if you start to scuff them up on outdoor courts. Now, if you look at these things on the speed ratio as well, coming in at a 2.69, shank score of 0.3 brings it up to a 2.99. And I really think that's where they belong. I think that these just give so much confidence with movement. Now, like I said, the midsole does give some pop, right? There is some pop to this shoe. It's just that coming to a stop in these. And I noticed with me really trying to practice kind of landing on my outside foot to stay balanced when we're doing these drills where I'm coming down, going through the cones, and having to kind of dribble pretty fast and then stop hard to try to get myself squared up to the rim. That's where I noticed that these shoes did their best work. It was just so sure-footed, putting my foot down, kind of going from high to low speed really quick. And that's where I think that's the rub on these. It's the confidence with the cutting, the confidence at high speeds that they're not going to roll over. That's where I think these do kind of their best work. Yeah, they're quick shoes, but it's more the stopping power versus the speed that I noticed in them. But getting into what was my biggest conundrum with the DVD2 was its fit. And like I said, the DVD1, you could fit an elephant foot in those things, and they were so forgiving. These ones, interesting, I had cramping almost every time I played in them on my left foot. I started to break them in after a few weeks, but on my right side, it was fine after a little bit, but on my left side, still had a little bit of cramping. But you look at all the measurements, pretty normal length, width, 9.7 centimeters. That's pretty good. The toe box taper is only 20 degrees. Toe box width, 10.4 centimeters. All the signs say that this should be equally as forgiving of a shoe. The one thing though is that the inflare on these shoes is 19 degrees and the apex of that inflare is a little bit more distal, right? A little bit closer to the forefoot of the shoe, so that there is just this point right here on the shoe, right where all this TPU is on the lateral side, that if you're somebody with prominent styloid process, metatarsus adductus, really, some perineal tendonitis, anything that's causing bulk on the outside of your foot where that apex is, it's just going to be an irritation right there. If you don't have that, then they're just as forgiving as the DVD1, but they're much more streamlined of a shoe, right? That inflare in them, right? And the geometry of them makes them much quicker of a shoe. So, I mean, people are going to like that. So I'd say narrow and medium foot. If you match the shoe up, if you're narrow, you could go down a half size. To me, I would probably just go true to size, narrow, medium foot, just because they lock down well enough. You get that roomy fit. You can put an orthotic or brace in it, things like that. If you're a 2E and all of the width is right in your fifth metatarsal, Taylor's bunions, things like that, then I think these might be a mismatch unless you're okay with a little bit of a longer break-in or some shoe stretchers. A 4E, because they are so wide to begin with, right, I think they're okay going up a half size. Like I said, if you're not, if you don't have that apex of your foot, right, if the shoe isn't butting up against it. So the fit on these more has to do with your shape foot matching the shape of these. like I said, narrow and medium feet, just really, that's not an issue for. It's really the 2E and 4E. If you've got that really prominent outside of your foot, that's where you're going to have the issues. If you don't, then honestly, a 2E probably just go true to size on these, 4E up 1/2 size. Just watch out for that bump. Now, in terms of the snake bitten foot, same thing, heel pain, ball of foot pain, Achilles tendonitis, ankle sprainers, really, shin splints, anybody. These are going to be great for orthotics, braces. These do really well. Like I said, the lockdown on these is very nice, especially, you got to like make sure the tongue gets cinched into there, but after that, that takes a half a second. It's very, very kind of all-encompassing type lockdown on these. I will say though, if you're somebody with peroneal tendonitis, or like I said, Taylor's bunion, anything on that lateral side, that's really the opt-out. Like I said, you can put shoe stretchers in them, and just kind of put some strategic socks and things like that, lacrosse balls, tennis balls in there, and that will really help you out. But I think as long as you get the fit right, these will really treat you well. And getting into the all-important playability, the DVD2, kind of touched on it a little bit, but once again, probably the most sure-footed shoe out there right now, as long as you keep the treads nice, right? And, I've been playing on, like I said, maybe a little bit more of a humid area recently, so I've noticed some more slick courts, and even on those, as long as the rubber was, as long as you can wipe them down, like I said, the sure-footedness of these, the way the shoe is constructed is just, it's really second to none. Even in the 361 degree category, right? The AG4, much bulkier of a shoe, right? Much more of like a hulking type shoe. These ones, a little more low profile, yet they pack the punch that the AG4 does in terms, like I said, that stopping power, the containment, and like that. So yeah, they're a little more nimble than the DVD1, for sure. I think 361 kind of threaded that needle. They did sacrifice a little bit on, like I said, where my foot would cramp. And like I said, there's these 2 tabs here, right? I mean, that's also going to cramp down on your foot a little bit when you cinch those down. You can actually bypass these if you want to. I wouldn't, just because when a shoe's manufactured for one thing, that's what you should use it for. But I would say if you want a sure-footed shoe that does have some of that nimble power to it and, pretty nimble hop on it, a little more speed, definitely a great pickup. And an interesting update to the DVD1. Really, I think, much more meant for somebody with quicker footwork, and I think to complement somebody with a little more quicker footwork and someone that needs that crazy stopping power, whether it be for a step back, change of direction, or just reorienting to the net. So love to hear your thoughts on these, especially if you have been following kind of all my 361 videos recently and kind of seeing what they've been doing. If you picked up any of them, kind of what's been your favorite, and kind of what have you been going for recently. So let me know in comments down below. And speaking of some of the other 361 degree shoes out there, if you do want to see the Big 3 5.0 Quick Pro run to the knife, make sure you click into this video up above and subscribe down below. Respect, rubber, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.